The amount of people in my career who have said to me, "You're so underrated." Like I once had an agent say to me, "You're one of the most underrated actors, and it makes me so mad. You're one of the most underrated actors in Hollywood." And I was like, "Well, dude, do something about it."
This is Really Famous. I'm Kara Mayer Robinson, and I interview famous people. But I don't just interview them like your typical interview. I'm not really interested in those same old questions. Instead, I like to know who they really are and what they really think. Sometimes it's like listening to old friends catching up, and other times it's like eavesdropping on a therapy session. Today, I'm sitting down with Tony Goldwyn. So if you watch Scandal, you know Tony plays Fitz, or President Fitzgerald Grant. If you don't watch Scandal, you probably know that anyway. Or you may remember him going way back to the movie Ghost. He played Patrick Swayze's best friend, and not such a great guy, as it turned out. And he's been in so many things since then, but he's not just an actor, he's also a director, and we talk about a lot of the shows that he's worked on. Tony has a serious family lineage. Yes, his last name is Goldwyn, and his grandfather was Samuel Goldwyn, who was like one of the original film producers, and he's the G in MGM. Tony's other grandparents and his parents and siblings are also in the entertainment industry, and we'll talk about that. Plus, he dabbles in plenty of other things. For example, he has published a few articles in magazines like More and In Style. Now, Tony is on Broadway in the play Network with Bryan Cranston and Tatiana Maslany. Network is based on the 1976 movie Network. I saw it just before it opened when it was in previews, and it was excellent. It was so engaging, super relevant today. If you're going to be in New York, score yourself some tickets. Sit up front if you can. I was in the second row, and it was spectacular. So if you're not in New York, no biggie. You can gaze at the photos and videos that I took when I saw it, which was a few days before meeting Tony. I put a link in the show notes. Side note, 2019 is looking bright for Really Famous. I have guests who I've already met and had really cool conversations with, and others on the way, and they're all going to arrive in your podcast app soon, so be sure to tap on the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. Now, about this conversation, Tony shares lots of anecdotes, and we get to go off on tangents of all kinds, which is my kind of conversation. He really got into the groove, but I have to say, I feel like I only scratched the surface with him. He's a thoughtful person, he has a fascinating history, and he has analyzed life and what has happened to him, and he has a really genuine humility, and I appreciate all that. I feel like I'm going to need a second episode at some point. But in the meantime, we have this one.
Media company that you used to write for or not?
It is produced by me.
Or you did, you're totally your thing.
Me and my interns.
Which is awesome, because then you own it too.
I own it.
Yeah.
I own it, which is nice.
No, it is nice,
But the problem with that is there's a lot of business stuff
right.
that gets in the way. For me, I would rather just do this.
Right. But you have to do all the housekeeping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe one day there will be somebody else owning it and producing it.
Right.
But right now, it's my independent podcast. So I do with it whatever I want.
Right.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
But you are a writer.
Well, I write. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a professional writer. I write articles. I've written for magazines and newspapers and stuff.
I know.
And I've done I guess by now I've done a lot of public speaking. So I write whatever I say, but I'm not a screenwriter or playwright. I don't write dramatic writing.
But just because you're not a dramatic writer doesn't mean you're not a writer.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
If you write things, you're a writer.
If you put words down on paper, you're a writer.
Most people would say if you get words on paper and then actually they get published in magazines.
Well, that's true. So I'm a writer. It just feels a little. I know. Maybe I've always been this way. It took me for a while to call myself a director, until I'd actually finished directing a feature film and it was actually in the theaters. I was like, oh, I guess I can call myself a director. Even though by the time it came out, I'd been directing for a couple of years because it took that to get it made. So I'm careful of, I don't know.
You're humble.
I guess that's it. I don't know. There's a lot of bullshit in our business, and a lot of people who take up space with a pitch, with an idea. You know what I mean? With a line of bullshit.
Yeah.
So I always try and make sure if putting something out there that it actually can back it up. Because I'm sort of allergic to that tendency to over promote oneself with hyperbole. Maybe because I'm terrified of being called out.
Maybe, but so that's an interesting. Well, that's just your personality, obviously.
Yeah, and I just experienced a lot in my career. People who lie. Honestly, I don't mean to start off this conversation in a jaded way because I'm not particularly jaded, but it also used to really bother me when people would just over promote themselves, and then I've actually been in business with a lot of people who say things that are not exactly true. So I always err on the side of humility because I think that'll make you come off looking better in the end.
Well, that's true. But I think that bothers me too. But it's funny because you got right into one of my personal, like the things that I really dislike when I see it is lies. Like if I could label them a liar or whatever, to me, that's one of the worst things you can be. I don't know if it really is one of the worst things somebody can be. I'm sure there are worse things. But to me, it's one of those things that is very offensive to me. And I really balk at it or turns me off big time. I completely
agree. It's funny. I was thinking about this literally the other night because our show network deals with this and what's happening in our media culture and Bryan Cranston's character Howard Beale talks about people should just get angry. I suspect we'll talk more about this in a minute, but
we will.
But he's like, just get angry and then we'll decide what to do with it. But just get angry first, which is kind of where our politics have gone. And I was thinking, well, what actually makes me really mad? Because I have a pretty sort of high threshold, I guess, for losing my shit. And lying is one of them. When people lie to me, it just makes me crazy. And not that I've not been guilty of it in the past. Can I tell you a really stupid anecdote?
Yeah.
Of one of the things that put me off lying at a relatively early age. Not that I've been a saint since then, but I used to, as a young adolescent, like 10, 11, 12, sort of pubescent years, I had a very active fantasy life and also was going through a time of great sort of social insecurity going into middle school and not knowing how to navigate that. So I started to make up elaborate stories about myself for social acceptance. I mean, crazy elaborate stories about myself about just different stuff that I was into, and the story started to intersect and interweave, and I had a whole kind of persona and story.
Wait, I'm gonna need some specifics.
That was completely not true.
Okay, but
one of them. So it started out with I transitioned into 7th grade from going to a small school in Los Angeles, a private school, and I wanted to go to public school. So I went from having the same 20 people in my class from the time I was 6 to a school of 1,500 kids. So I had 800 kids in my, whatever, 600-700 kids in my grade, and I didn't know anybody. So I didn't know how to make friends, and it was it was very disorienting. And so when I talk to people, I talk about my girlfriend. I was 12, right? So I talk about my girlfriend.
Let me guess, was she from Canada?
Usually people, I feel like
Canada,
kids
but I was
that
only
age
12.
make up.
I wasn't that well traveled.
Not that way, but I think that at that age, the popular story is, I have a girlfriend. She lives in Canada. That's why you never see her.
Well, maybe I said she lived in the valley. I don't know.
Right.
Her
Okay, so you had a
geographical
girlfriend.
location actually never came up, as I recall, but her name was Lisa, as I recall. And I filled it in completely, her whole, who she was. It's sort of pathetic.
Or imaginative.
I literally created this whole character, and I'll talk about her. I also was a semi-professional ski racer. Yes, I was on the junior national ski team, specializing in giant slalom at 12 years old.
What? That's impressive.
And, and I liked to ski, but I was not. I was not a racer. Anyway, that was another thing. Things like that. What else? Honestly, those were the two main.
But the good thing is,
I think I said that I would like. It was before I even thought about being an actor, but I think I said I acted in television commercials, and I was quite specific about the kinds of commercials that I had been in, and so I created this whole persona that I thought would make me appear kind of fabulous, and people believed it, and they were like, "Wow, that's so cool." And it went on for over a year, and I was at a summer camp. My father got it in his head to send me to this survivalist camp in Wyoming, where run by these drunken cowboys, and they take young boys and they'd make you. They'd get you up at 5 o'clock in the morning and send you out into the woods to work with chainsaws, I recall. I don't know why, 12, 13-year-old boys were given chainsaws with no training, but we were cutting down trees and chopping up lumber and stuff like that.
That actually sounds like a good idea.
Like, you're going to work before you have breakfast. That was the thing. And then they taught you survival skills. And at the end of it, you spent a week in the wilderness with no food, and you'd been taught supposedly all these skills of how to survive, and you were in a group of 6 or 7 boys, and you were given a gun, a rifle, and every boy had a bullet and a hunting knife and no food. And so we were supposed to team up. Now they gave us live firearms with no training.
with one bullet.
With one bullet each. So each kid could try to kill something, and then you'd share it or deal with it, whatever.
Right.
So basically we didn't eat for a week. Anyways, but we all became quite close. It was torture, and the guys probably sat drinking whiskey and laughing at us and collecting whatever cash they were paid for the tuition of this camp. But anyway, so my point is, this group of guys, I had with them told them all of my wild stories. And at the end of this thing, when we got back, they all sat me down and they were like, "We need to talk to you." I said, "What?" And they said, "We know everything you've said is bullshit." I said, what are you talking about? They go, you said this doesn't add up to that, and we know you're lying. And you're not a ski racer because so-and-so is on the junior national team, and he's never heard of you in the places you... They called me out on all of my stuff. They just knew, and they did an intervention. And it was super intense. And I remember crying, and they said, "Why do you do... you're a good dude. Why are you doing this? You don't have to do this. We like you. Why do you make up this elaborate thing, man?" And it was so confronting to me that it kind of cured me of the impulse to to gild the lily or exaggerate my own importance or do anything. It was very intense, but it was an incredible gift that these guys gave me. Really, it was done kind of lovingly, and for 13-year-olds, the fact that they didn't just renounce me was amazing to me. I couldn't believe that they were so incredibly kind and mature in their the way that they laid it out for me. So anyway, that's a neither here nor there story, but isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that is crazy. But also it's interesting because, first of all, it happened at such a young age. And the fact that they didn't renounce you and they weren't like, "Oh, this kid," and they just kind of threw you out to the street or something, that's really amazing.
It was amazing.
And so that probably also made you more confident in who you really are, I would think.
Well, I guess what I realized I had to start from scratch. And if I was going to be talking about something, it would be so much better if it was real. So I needed to start to build from there. As opposed to a lot of people have an impulse. They feel they need to appear more fabulous than they are because the way they are is not enough. And I was like, well, what about if you just like do it?
Right.
You can say, here's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and you don't even have to say it
people are
because
like,
you
oh
feel
my God,
it.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Or that doesn't interest me. But at least you don't have to, it's also less exhausting.
Yeah.
Like, and so I kind of can smell it when someone's doing that. And I immediately am turned off.
So you're lucky that you took care of that then, because in this business especially now, that would be basically what you were doing, what you'd be doing, or like feel like you have to do if you didn't get it out of your system.
Well, and in Hollywood and in showbiz in general, you know, there are people who have whole careers doing that.
Like
frankly.
smoke and mirrors almost.
Yeah, and you know, people get very far. And then they inevitably crash because you can only be a con man or woman to a point before people start to find out that you're full of it.
Yeah.
So.
Plus, and then like people like you can sense it, you said. So like there are probably other people out there too, or in Hollywood who can sense it.
Everybody knows.
Everybody knows?
Everybody knows, yeah.
But it's a game that you have to play?
I guess if you're a salesperson, if you're an agent, but look, even if you're an agent and you're selling a client, if that client can't deliver, you know, I don't know. I mean, those are professions where the really good people don't have to lie. There's not the percentage of people who are really first rate is rather small in my experience.
Really?
In terms of producers and agents who are really people who are selling a product. You know, producers got projects or this they're trying to raise money for, and they're hustling all the time.
Yeah.
To get you to believe in what they're going to present to you. You know what I mean? And anyway, this could take up the whole conversation.
It could easily. See, but this is the nice thing about the podcast is you don't know what conversation you're going to get into because it's kind of like if you were just to like sit down and have coffee or something. Right. That's what would happen too.
And it's the same in politics too. You know, like it's so tragic to me how often politicians lie and with what ease that they lie, and how rare it is and how special it is when people in public life are straight. Mm-hmm. You know, look, there are compromises that we all have to make and that they all have to make, but you know, for someone to maintain their integrity and tell the truth is very difficult and really admirable. So I think we're sort of in a cycle right now, which is so sad, that where the truth doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. It's really what you can sell, and if you can just keep putting it out there, it somehow becomes true.
Right. Okay. So that leads us right into.
Oh God.
Right. This obviously leads us right into network, which we'll talk about right now. But just one side thing before I forget about what you said also about your intricate stories that you made up. So it also says that you have a pretty good imagination, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe I ended up putting those skills to good use.
Yeah, but yeah. I mean, that does...
because I tell stories and I make up elaborate lives of the characters that I play, or if I'm directing, you know, like to create those kinds of characters. So yeah. Yeah. I end up making a buck off it.
Exactly. So you sublimated it in a very healthy way.
Right.
Do you give yourself backstories when you're acting?
Yeah, you have to.
You always do before you start,
very important. Yeah, I tend to do it immediately, and then it evolves as I get to know a character better. Just talking about the actor process for a minute. It used to be I always loved doing it, creating biographies for characters, but it's a very tricky thing because I would get really into it. But then sometimes it would be an encumbrance to me because I had made all these decisions about a character that didn't necessarily have so much to do with the play or the movie that I was working on. So then I'd be doing it and going, yeah, but I decided that he was this, that in 1965 or whatever.
But it conflicted.
But it didn't help me at all. It kind of became this weight. So I had to learn how to be fluid in my... Because, you know, when you're playing a character, it's constantly evolving, and it's like peeling an onion. You're always trying to discover the next layer. You never know. And frankly, I realize that's how life is. We think we know ourselves. We think we know where our life is going, and we're constantly surprised by ourselves, by our lives, about who we are and what we represent and what we're capable of, good or bad. You know, we always try and like have a policy. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. And those absolutes are the things that trip us up. So I found you have to sort of include that in your process. So now what I do is I more ask questions as I'm reading a script. I'm like, well, what about this? Well, could be this. And then I'll go on a riff about that to myself, allowing that to maybe not. Maybe that's going to be totally different. You know, so, but it tends to, as you do it, it tends to give you a real foundation of, in your imagination, so that it's not a one-dimensional kind of, or two-dimensional thing that you're working on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it does help up to a point. There's like a sweet spot almost of being able to use that before it weighs you down.
Yeah, it just needs to stay fluid and changeable.
Fluid.
And yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the play, Network. So I just saw it over the weekend. Saw it on Saturday night. It was amazing. I loved it. It was so good. You were good. Bryan Cranston was good. Tatiana was. Everybody was good. The story was like, I kept thinking it was really like thought provoking. Yeah. And I had not seen the movie. For everyone listening, right? I had not seen it first. For everyone listening, this play is on Broadway now, and it is based on a movie from 1976 called Network.
Yeah, Sidney Lumet directed it. It starred William Holden, whose character I play, Faye Dunaway, whose character Tatiana Maslany plays, and Peter Finch, who Bryan Cranston plays his character. So, and it won multiple, and written, most importantly, by one of our greatest writers in theater, film, and television, Paddy Chayefsky. So this is, and it's directed by this extraordinary European director named Ivo van Hove, who is really a visionary and has completely reinvented this piece to be both completely of today, even though it's set in 1975, but also very, very faithful to the script that Paddy Chayefsky wrote. And it's quite different than the movie.
Okay, so different than the movie. I wouldn't know about that, but I do know that it is so of today, even though it takes place in the 70s. So it's so interesting to watch this like metamorphosis going on, like in front of your eyes, of what happens to this anchor man and this network. Am I describing this properly?
The basic idea of the story, which in 1976 was a satire, sort of a dystopian satire of where Paddy Chayefsky saw our media culture going. Today we're living
in the 70s.
We're living it exactly as he imagined it. So it's about a guy called Howard Beale, who Bryan Cranston plays. Howard is sort of a grand old man of news. He's the anchor of a struggling network that's having some trouble transitioning into sort of the modern age of television. And I play the head of the news division, Max Schumacher. And I, at the beginning of the play, have been forced to fire my best friend, Howard Beale, because he's getting low ratings and he's kind of depressed, and his wife has recently died. He's just going through a really hard time, and he's being phased out for, the modern age. And in fact, the world of journalism and news as we knew it is completely changing because of money. We were of the sort of Edward R. Murrow, Walter Cronkite generation of newsmen, and we're becoming dinosaurs. And Coca-Cola and IBM and corporate America has really taken over and pressuring television. It's about getting ratings. So Howard goes on television, not to give too much away, and says he's going to commit suicide.
Right, he says that on live TV.
Live TV. He's like, next week I will be killing myself on television. And it creates a catastrophe in the network, but the ratings go through the roof. And these, the people that are the corporate heads realize they have a tiger by the tail, and they want more of it. And it really is about a man who starts to lose his mind very, very publicly. And I'm trying to save him, and the network is trying to make a buck off of him. And it sort of like the precursor of what reality television became with Jerry Springer and Morton Downey Jr. and then now Fox News and, you know, all of it.
All of it, right?
And really Donald Trump. You know what has landed, you know, with a celebrity in the White House.
And how they
really
harness
knows how to manipulate the news media to his advantage and to message and to spin stuff, you know, that may or may not be true, and it kind of doesn't matter.
Right, and manipulate people into a powerful force behind him, which is interesting. You see in the play too that even, I don't want to give it away, but it's so interesting to see all the different people get sucked into this new way of being on TV, which could be like Trump, it could be what, I don't want to keep, you know, going down the names.
Yeah, I mean,
it
it sort of started in the 90s with, you know, reality TV with Shock Jock.
Yeah.
You know, so is I think
interesting.
Morton Downey Jr., if people remember, kind of, to me, was the first one who like had a show like that, which was just throwing firebombs and and then Jerry Springer and, you know, Geraldo Rivera started doing it, who was a more legit journalist who then, you know, went on the fringes, you know, and then on the conservative, you know, he's very conservative, but, you know, Rush Limbaugh and what's his name, the other, you know, conservative radio host. Oh my God, I'm blanking on his name. But, you know, or so much of Fox News, what they did of really, you know, news as entertainment and to fire up,
to fire people up,
people's anger and outrage,
to get more leverage
and ratings, and you know, ultimately tremendous power.
So it was funny. I had just watched, I think 2 nights before. Do you know Talk Radio? It was a play.
The Eric Bogosian play, yeah.
Yeah. So I interviewed Eric on last Friday.
Oh, yeah.
So on
Eric's
Thursday
awesome.
night, he's awesome. On Thursday night, I watched Talk Radio.
That's really good. The movie or the Alec
Baldwin?
Baldwin?
Alec Baldwin.
Yeah.
And Eric was the lead.
Oliver
and it
Stone
was
directed
Oliver
that
Stone,
film,
right?
yeah.
So Eric had been nominated for a Pulitzer for the play, for writing it. And he was in the play as well, the first run.
Yeah.
And then Oliver Stone wanted to make a movie from it, so he did, or out of it. And so I was watching that movie the night before, and without giving too much away, there were so many parallels. It was so interesting. And that film was from the 80s.
Yeah.
And then here this is. And it's like both were so not only similar, but relevant today. So it's
Eric's a genius. He really is.
And now, okay, so you and Bryan Cranston also, you can see on stage, you seem to have a real chemistry.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, for sure. Like you play old friends, not just colleagues, but friends. And I could sense that for sure on stage. You guys knew each other ahead of time, right?
Yeah, Bryan and I met 21 years ago. We did a mini-series for HBO called From Earth to the Moon, which Tom Hanks and Ron Howard produced, and it was about the Apollo space program. And I played Neil Armstrong, and Bryan played Buzz Aldrin. And so one of the episodes was all about the Apollo 11 mission. So Bryan and I spent a lot of time together in a spaceship and became friends. And I remembered doing that during that show. This was preceded Malcolm in the Middle. And the thing Bryan was best known for at that point, you know, he'd worked, he had a whole career. He was in his, I think, early to mid 40s, and was, you know, everyone thought he was a really good actor, but he's best known for playing the dentist in Seinfeld.
Right.
And he was hilarious in that. But
Tim Watley, right?
His career had, Dr. Tim. But his career had not broken out. And as I got to know him, I remembered saying to myself, this guy's a genius. And no one knows it. Like, he is, if you get to know Bryan, he's one of the funniest people you'll ever meet. He just has this crazy, eccentric sense of humor, and he can do impressions of the weirdest people to have you on the floor laughing. And in anything I'd seen him in, I'd never seen that. Other than he was always really good, you know. And he's quite a brilliant man too. And I part of me was like, oh my God, look at Bryan's 42, 44, and I just felt so frustrated. I thought, God, man, it's just this business is so crazy that someone can be this gifted, and then all of a sudden, a year or two later, he's in Malcolm in the Middle,
right? Which still wasn't even. Yeah.
I was like, yes, look at, because he's genius in that. Did you ever watch that? I mean,
I have never seen Malcolm in the Middle, not even one scene.
It's so good.
Okay.
It's for a younger audience, but he and Jane Kaczmarek play the parents of these kids, and he's this browbeaten husband, and he's hilariously funny. I mean, he just, the stuff he does in that, it's a really well written, clever
I'll check
show.
it out.
I highly recommend it.
Okay. I'm sure it's on Netflix or
and he
something.
and Jane are both brilliant in it. Yeah, but if you watch it in a couple of episodes, what Bryan does is just amazing in it.
So you were
I was
like,
so
yes.
happy for him, and the show was a big success, and I think ran for several years, and then Walter White comes around and like transforms television as we know it.
Seriously.
And he becomes one of our greatest actors, so anyway,
So it
I've
was,
just been
like,
so
validating,
happy for him, and to see that happen for somebody who I just regard so highly and I was so fond of, and he's also the dearest, most down to earth, kind human being. He and his wife Robin are both like that. So anyway, it was all great,
Right.
and then we saw each other over the years, and I was always just so happy for him, and then then this happened. So
Okay, so
it's
back
a
on
great
a sec.
reunion. Mhm.
So this is a good reunion, but so you were frustrated. Why is he 42 and so obviously amazing? Do you think that happens a lot?
Yeah.
Why?
Let me just say there are few people as gifted as Bryan Cranston, so it doesn't happen
But
a
it's
lot.
but it's not a totally out there story that somebody
No, but
as
there
gifted
are
as Bryan.
many people that I've known over the years. Look, actors need parts, and it's the sucky thing about being an actor. You can't do your thing unless someone provides you with the opportunity, or you create it for yourself. Sylvester Stallone created Rocky for himself.
Brilliant to do that. Good move.
And a lot of people have done that. They're like, and that's kind of what it takes. You gotta have a kind of persistence to prevail in this business, unless you just get super lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Look, and Bryan worked his butt off, and he was persistent, and luck in many ways, as they say, is where opportunity meets preparation. So he was prepared, and the opportunity presented itself to him. And over the years, also, what happens to someone like Bryan is you get. And I see this all the time. Everyone goes, "Yeah, he's great. He's great." In the business, people are like, "Oh, you can count on Bryan. He's great." The amount of people in my career who have said to me, "You're so underrated." I once had an agent say to me, "You're one of the most underrated actors, and it makes me so mad. You're one of the most underrated actors in Hollywood." And I was like, "Well, dude, do something about it."
Right. It's good that you recognize it. You're the only person in the position.
No, but I got depressed. I remember being in my early 30s, and I was in a movie, and he was like, "It makes me so mad. You're so good. You're just so under." And I was like, "Help!"
Right.
But after a while, as an actor who I worked with early in my career once said, cream tends to rise.
Yeah.
So the really wonderful actors, people start to know about it, but they need the opportunities. So
and how do they get the opportunities?
there
then?
are, some they fight for them. Mostly that's it. I gotta say,
Really?
you just gotta keep fighting, because I also know many, many, many brilliant actors who don't have that skill of just putting themselves out there and scrapping for stuff, and they tend to not get the shots. It's unless they get lucky and someone just gives them the part, and they win an award, or they get celebrated, and that does happen.
Yeah.
But that's much harder, and if that can break your heart, because you see, being an artist, you really are so vulnerable, and you got to develop a thick skin, and you get attacked and criticized and rejected constantly, and so and we're by definition sensitive creatures.
Yeah.
So it's one of the things that's very hard about it. I mean, there are painters. My stepfather was a painter, and he suffered from depression. And I know there were decades when my stepfather John, who I thought was quite a wonderful painter, would never show his work to anyone. He was quite celebrated in his early career, and then he got freaked out and he refused to show anybody his work. He'd go to his studio and paint every day, but he wouldn't show his work, and he'd have gallery owners going, "We want to come by and look," and he'd set up these studio visits with Gagosian and major galleries, and then he'd cancel at the last minute because he couldn't bear the rejection. He couldn't bear to be judged and have his work judged by somebody else in a mercantile way. And as a result, I don't mean to be depressing, but he died in obscurity,
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And I do know some, actors tend to be show-offs, so it's maybe not as common for an actor, but it is, I do know people who don't have that muscle and they don't get the attention that they deserve.
Right. It's almost like we were talking about before, how like, not to bring myself into, but with the podcast, this is my thing, is talking and like getting to know people, but there are the business sides of it. Like, because it's my podcast, I have to think about those things.
Right.
It's the same thing with acting. Like, you're acting, you need other muscles to build as well.
If anybody's listening to this who wants to get into this game, you have to be, as a friend of mine put it early on, you have to be the president of your own company, because it is a business. And while if you have not developed your creative skills, then you're nowhere. That gets to the bullshit thing we were talking about at the beginning. The hustle. If you got nothing to hustle, you're wasting your time hustling. But if you've put 95% of your attention on developing yourself as an artist, and you have something to say and you have something to offer, then that other 5%, you got to double down on it.
Right.
Because
so you need both too. You
do
really need both, or else
You
it's going to
really
be
do.
really tough.
Yeah, and it's hard to develop those skills. It took me a very long time to understand that. It took me a long time.
Did you almost quit?
I didn't know. I never almost quit. I had multiple times where I thought it would never work out in my 20s, where I literally was in despair, thinking this is just never going to happen, or doubting whether I had the capability to do it. I got I got some incredibly, the most valuable advice I've ever received at 19 years old. My brother-in-law was a very famous jazz musician, and it was at a moment I was in college and I was like desperate to be an actor and certain that that's what I wanted to do, but had no idea how to go about it or if I had the goods. And I was sort of complaining to Gary one day, and I was like, "How do you know?" And I don't know. And and he was like, "Look, when I was your age, I felt exactly the same as you." And he said, "And Tony, I was a kid from a small town in Indiana who was a child prodigy, but I had no idea if I could be a professional musician. And I came to New York, and I said to myself, if I commit to this thing that I'm so passionate about 100%, one of three things will happen. Or one of two things will happen. I don't know. We'll count after I say this. Either my path will be exactly what I imagine, and I'll become what I see, and I'll be successful at it, or it will lead me to something else that I have no idea about that I'm supposed to be doing. But I guess, or the third thing is it'll all go up in flames and it won't work. But I won't be the guy who at 40 or 50 years old looks back at his life and says, gee, maybe I could have if I'd only tried. Mm-hmm. He said, you don't want to be that guy.
That's good advice.
And I was like, oh my God, that's the greatest advice ever. So many times during my early career, when I was rejected or I just couldn't get traction, or, had months out of work, where I thought it just is not happening, I was like, well, I made a commitment to this and I'm going to keep doing it 100%. Because I didn't know what else to do, but also I made a commitment to do this, and until something else reveals itself, I'm just going to keep going. So that pulled me through,
Uh-huh.
And I've shared that advice with a lot of people because it still is the most valuable thing.
But it's so interesting to think that, like, people who see you on Scandal, let's say, like, that you actually had that experience years ago where, like, you felt like you weren't even gonna get a job. You would do an audition and you wouldn't get a job.
Oh my God, the number of people who told me hang it up.
Oh, really? Told you to hang it up?
Many. Yeah. Oh,
like
God.
who?
Jesus, so many. My first real acting teacher, who is to this day the best acting teacher I've ever had. It was the teacher at Brandeis University where I went to college, and luckily I this guy was teaching there when I was there, but he was a real cranky, gruff, scary dude. And when I got to Brandeis, I was in his acting class. I transferred there as a junior, filled with ambition to be an actor. Like, it was the same age as that year when I met Gary. I was 19 and like, I'm gonna do this. And Brandeis had quite a serious theater department, and it was a very good school academically. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go there, and I went there to try and, and I got into Ted's class, and he just was not impressed with me at all. And he was very rough on me, and oh God, he said the meanest thing to me. So, and I did not get cast in anything there. Like, in the first school I went to, Hamilton College, I got there and I immediately got the lead in the first play, and I was like, oh, this is easy. Like, I did a lot there. It was this tiny school, and I got to Brandeis and I auditioned for everything, got cast in nothing. And they literally, I felt like I was stinking up the room every time I went in. I was like, what is happening? And I went in Ted's class and I was terrified, and he just was not. So I guess this ambition thing revealed itself to me, because I was like, well, it's not happening here, so screw them. I'm going to get a job in Boston. I'm going to see what else I can do. So I went through the local papers for auditions, and and I'd been there like 6 months into the school year, like the winter time, and I'd flopped. So I went in and I saw that there was auditions for this thing called the Boston Shakespeare Company, which was a semi-professional Shakespeare company, which means it wasn't a union company, but there were adult actors, and they had a budget, and they did full productions of classical works, and they were auditioning for Richard III, the Shakespeare play. So I went in, it's like, I'm going to go audition for this. So I went in and auditioned, and I got cast as the Duke of Clarence, which is a really good part in Richard III. I couldn't believe I got cast. Okay, so I was beside myself with excitement. So I go to Ted, who was head of the theater department, in addition to my acting teacher. And I said, Ted, I just wanted to let you know, I got this opportunity, and is it okay that I want to make sure it's okay that I do this? And he sits in his office and he goes, well, that's great. I just hope you understand why they cast you.
Oh boy.
I was like, what? He's like, I just think you need, like, why they cast you in the part. And I was like, what? He said, well, your last name, Goldwyn. And for people that don't know, my grandfather was a famous movie producer. I have a famous last name, right? I'm from a Hollywood family. So he said, you got the part because your name's Goldwyn. That's why they hired you. And I almost burst into tears. And I was like, I don't know. Well, if that's true, I still think it's a good opportunity for me, and I'm going to do it, because I'm going to just. And I was bright red, and he was like, no, you should. That's great. That's good. You should do it.
That is so mean.
It was so hurtful.
That is so
But
rude.
I was like, all right, well, maybe that's true, but that doesn't mean I want to be an actor any less. So I'm still going to try. So I went in and did it. Okay, so I did this show, which I think the production was probably terrible. But I got to do,
Wait, why do you think?
I just laughed because the Boston Shakespeare Company, the Boston Globe hated this theater company. So every show that we did, got just trashed in the paper. But that did not matter. I got to do it. It was a great experience for me. One of my other castmates in that show is the great actor Courtney B. Vance.
Get out of
Courtney
here.
was at Harvard as an undergraduate, and he did the same thing I did. So we were in this together, and that's how we became friends.
Oh, that is cool.
And so, right? Good for us.
Yes.
And I probably, for a 20-year-old or whatever, I just turned 20 by the time I was almost 20, I did okay. Like, I got through. And I'll never forget this. My class came to see me in the show.
Your
Ted, my teacher,
Ted brought the class?
Like, let's go support Tony, and and see him in the show. And his face after seeing me in the show was kind of like, that wasn't bad. Like, that was. I remember just the look on his face. He was surprised that I did okay, and and I had sort of, by being hurt that way, I was like, fuck him. I don't give a shit. I'm doing this. I don't need him. I wanted so desperately his approval before. And then when he said that to me, I was like, well, screw you. I'm with or without you, I'm going to pursue this thing. And then the look on his face when they came back I was pleased that they came to kind of support me. And I could just see on his face that he was surprised. And I was like,
The satisfaction.
And so I was a junior in college. This was this was like the spring of that year. So that was the end of the year. And he had auditions, and he cast me in the lead of the show that he was directing for the fall play of my senior year in college.
Whoa, what a switcheroo.
And so then I became like the leading actor or whatever. I think I got like 3 leads in the next year. And it was just like, I was like, oh, okay, that's how it works. You just don't, you can't. And, I go on length about that story because that just replicated itself so many times in my career. Oh my God. I had an agent once who said to me, after I'd started working a bit, had not yet done Ghost, which was my first big break. But I was a working actor and struggling though, but trying to getting jobs, but still feeling like I was sucking wind, not getting traction. And I felt that I needed a bigger agent. So I got this agency was going to sign me, and I needed to have a meeting with the head of the agency, right? And she was in LA, so I'd go out to LA and I kept trying to schedule this meeting, right? And the New York agents were like, no, we really want you, and she's got to meet you, and but it's all great, and we've told her we love you, and I'm calling, and she's not returning my calls, and I keep persistently calling her. I finally get this woman on the phone, and she's like, oh yes. What's your name again? I said, Tony Goldwyn. She's like, oh, yes. I just, honestly, I looked at your tape because you have a demo reel of like scenes from stuff that you've done. I looked at your tape and frankly, I just didn't see much there. And I was like, okay. Yes, goodbye. And she hung up the phone on me. And I thought, what? I've been told that I thought she was going to sign me. I thought they wanted me. And she said this to me, and I was at that point 28 or 29 years, like right before I got, no, it was 27 or 28, about a year before I got Ghost. But that was incredibly painful.
And like, why did everybody lead you to believe?
Yeah, so it's so similar. Those kinds of things happen, and you just go, well, okay. Yeah. And then you just chuck on, and that's happened to me a lot in different ways, whether it, as I got bigger things, the critic from the New York Times giving you a shitty review, and you're like, oh, or
for what?
Well, I got Frank Rich. I remember giving me, it wasn't that bad a review, but I had a big success in a play in New York in 1990. I won an Obie Award, and it was like I got all these rave reviews, and it was at the same year that Ghost came out, which was my first big part in a movie. My career really took off, right?
Ghost, by the way.
And so I was sort of for a moment hot, and because several times in my career I've been hot and not hot, hot and not hot, and you get used to that cycle. But that was my first experience of it, and I was like, oh my God, just like being in a rocket ship. And the next play I did, Frank Rich who was the New York Times critic, didn't like it, and was rather dismissive of me in the play. My dear father, I learned I don't read reviews. I've learned not to read reviews because it just can't help you whether they're good or bad. It's irrelevant to it. It can only mess you up. So I sort of learned, like, I was still drawn to read them, but I was at distance, like, don't read the reviews. And my father calls me up the morning after the play opened. He's like, you okay?
Oh, no.
I'm like, Pop, I don't read the reviews. He's like, oh, well, I just want you to know I'm on your team, I don't get whatever the New York Times says, doesn't matter.
New York Times, really? That rag.
Really? You had to say that? So I'd go ahead and read the kind of review. Or, I don't know. There was a great critic, he was awful, but the critic for the New York Times, a famous critic, New York Magazine, John Simon, from the 60s and 70s through, but in the 90s when I was working, starting to work all the time. And I was in a play on Broadway, which was wonderful, and we got great reviews. And I thought, again, by that time, I was mid-30s. I was like, I don't care. I don't read them. So, which is my policy now, but I had two friends come and see the show, and they were completely civilians, like they were in, finance or something. They're like,
Civilians,
well, we loved it so much, and we're going to, but how do you feel about reviews? Like, I was like, well, I don't read them yet, but like, what about when you get a bad one? I was like, oh, well, I just don't look at them, so they don't. But I mean, like the one in New York Magazine, what they said about you, like, how do you deal with that? I was like, well, I don't know. I didn't read it. So then, of course, I had to go and look at it. Too. So by that time, I had enough of a sense of humor to
let it roll a little bit.
And he just said I was miscast or something. It wasn't that bad, but anyway.
But that could knock anybody. Like any of one of those examples
I mean,
could
look,
knock
Network's
anyone
going to
out.
open this week, and I will not be reading the reviews because I also have read good reviews of myself, and then you were very aware of that. My best friend, who I is an actor and a writer, and I always have him come and look at my work when I'm in a play. And the one I referred to back in 1990, The Sum of Us, it was called. It was this beautiful Australian play that was, a big hit and stuff. And we got a great review in the New York Times, which I studied.
Okay, so you studied it. Right.
This is before I learned my lesson. And he was like, Tony, your work's great, but you're playing the review. I was like, what? He said that thing that they said in the New York Times about you. You're like doing that.
So that's like settled into your brain.
He said something about my physicality or something, and he was like, "Man, you're really doing that." And I was like, "Oh, that's what I'm so aware of. Oh, they like this bit, so you can't."
Yeah, you can't. So you learned you just can't even look unless somebody says something about it, and then
I still would not. No. Now I would not. No, because there's nothing to be gained. It really, people's opinions are their opinions, and you cannot let it influence your work. And I've gotten bad reviews as a movie director. I've gotten great reviews and bad reviews, and it's painful. As a director, it's a little different because you're done, and it won't affect your work. But I don't know.
Yeah.
Someone's going to like you, someone's going to hate you. That's just the reality.
That's always going to happen no matter what. Right. So you can't ride those waves.
There's always one bad one. So,
even in your greatest performance.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, if the bad one's the New York Times, that's a bummer. It's a bummer in the theater because they have so much power. But so I always feel like when I get a good review, I just dodged a bullet. That's how I feel. I'm like, thank you. Okay. We got lucky this time.
And then move on. I suspect the reviews here are going to be good.
I suspect they will be, but I won't be reading them. And there will be there will be some bad ones.
Right. I mean, there was already, like I like to ask people questions or whatever. So I was even asking the, like one of the ushers or whatever, like, how's it going over here? How's everything? And she was just like, oh, people are loving this. So I don't know if I should have told you this though, because that might make you.
No. Look, the audience loves it. I know. And people who see it, they're the ones to me that matter.
Yep.
And someone might not. I've had multiple people go, oh, yeah, I love this, but I didn't like that part, and this didn't make sense to me, or I like this performance better than that performance. We're all entitled to that, to our experience of it. It's when it's sort of put out there publicly, and you are the authority for thousands of people who might potentially be forming an opinion. You can always tell on an opening, the day after opening, if you've gotten good reviews or not. Because an audience in previews might be like cheering. And if at the day after opening there's something quiet, you're like, ooh, I think the New York Times probably don't like us.
That's terrible, because that influences their experience of it. Yeah. Even if, not only does it stop them from going to get tickets, but that actually influences the way that they receive.
Yeah, or I've also had the opposite, where like perception was a little, muted in previews. And then all of a sudden after opening night, they're like, rah! Cheering and standing ovations.
So
like,
interesting.
Oh, well, the New York Times must have liked us because there's people are now feeling enfranchised too.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, people are, that's the way
influenced.
Of the world.
Yeah. Which also kind of reminds me a little bit of Network too, but in a different way. But it's like, it just shows you that like one authority figure saying something can really influence the way that people see a situation.
Yeah, I'm guilty of it myself.
All right, so let's go to a few of the things that you have directed. So Dexter is one of them. Personal favorite. Love Dexter. I love
Dexter's
that show.
A great show.
That was a good show. And that was like earlier. That was one of the early of like that type of show, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Really groundbreaking, yeah.
So you directed a bunch of episodes,
right?
Yeah,
my brother was the producer of Dexter. My brother John, who's a wonderful film and television producer, and he and a colleague of his found the book and developed it at Showtime. And so he said, would you direct one? And I was like, yeah. And then I came in and did a bunch of them, and I played a part on it, and it was
that is cool. So, okay, I just thought of something else that you said before. So, what was his name? Tim, the drama teacher?
Ted.
Okay.
Ted Kasnoff.
So Ted, is it possible that Ted was kind of impacted by your last name too, but in a negative way? Like, you know how he said
that he prejudged me?
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
In a negative, like it was like, oh, he's just a Goldwyn or whatever, so he just feels entitled or something.
Probably likely.
So do you come upon that too along the way?
Yeah.
Because just to clarify, so your grandfather...
My grandfather was a very famous movie
Goldwyn.
producer named Samuel Goldwyn, who was really one of the founders of the movie business.
The whole industry.
Yeah, he literally, produced the first feature-length film ever made in Hollywood, and many shorts in New York before that, like in 1912, 1914, the Squam came out, and won an Oscar. Went on to, win an Oscar for Best Picture in 1946 with The Best Years of Our Lives, and produced many classic films. And he made his last movie the year before I was born in 1959, which was Porgy and Bess. So his career spanned from 1912, I think, to 1959. He was really a giant and an extraordinary human being. So anyway, yeah, that was my grandpa. And he started the company that became MGM, so his name, was always attached to that, even though he never was a part of MGM. He had his own, he was an independent producer. But
okay.
But he's yeah.
But you would think that it might be easier for you to get a gig or get respect because of it.
It's both.
But it's also a two-edged sword.
Look, you get contact. The way my experience of it was, I think there were plenty of people that would judge me. I always knew that was kind of, after that thing had happened with Ted, I was like, that's their problem. It was more my personal hang-up that I had to decide for myself or prove to myself that I had the goods.
Right.
So it troubled me a lot until I was in my 30s, like till Ghost, and then after I'd done a few things where I really started to build a reputation of doing quality work myself. Then I was like, all right, I've earned my stripes. Up until then, I didn't want people thinking I'd gotten this because of my family, but I figured they probably thought that.
Right. Well, you can't win either anyway, no matter what.
It really doesn't matter. And what I discovered, I felt honestly in my 20s, it felt like more of an obstacle. Because people prejudged me, or they were like, It was hard for people to take you seriously because they're like, oh, you're a Hollywood kid. Once I'd made my bones a bit, it became an advantage. Because particularly when I, had multiple different successes and became a director, people were like, wow, that's so cool. You're like part of a legacy. Like, isn't that so interesting? And then it's become, so for the past 20 years or whatever, for me, it's been a beautiful thing to be a part of. Yeah. And I feel very privileged. My brothers are both, and two of my three brothers. I have two other sisters as well, but two of my brothers are in the business. It's something we share. Our kids are forming a fourth generation.
What are your kids doing?
In the business.
You have two daughters,
older
right?
daughter's a writer and is a television writer and wrote her. She wrote until recently on the show Supergirl was her first job, which was a hit, and she's doing other things. And my younger daughter's just starting out as an actress. My niece, my brother John's daughter, is a writer and performer. She wrote on the show Smilf, and she's in this company Groundlings in Los Angeles, this improv company. And Emily is super talented and is on another show.
Groundlings is huge.
Yeah. So it's an incredibly beautiful. I try to, pass on to my kids that it's like a beautiful thing to be a part of. You just got to figure out how you fit into it and contribute your own thing to it. And it's like, so in a way it's become a family business, but it's not a normal family business. It's not like, this is the company and you're going to get a job and come into the family business. And it doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Right. So it's not like that nepotism, like that beautiful advantage or whatever.
No, you meet people so you have access and you inherit a lot of knowledge by osmosis. Like, the greatest thing I learned, the greatest thing I got from my of being part of my family business was the understanding that it's about building a long-term career and about surviving to be my age and still in the game, as opposed to what we're led to believe, that being hot and being on the cover of a magazine and being, the flavor of the it guy, that's the thing. Our culture, our pop culture tells us that's what you want to be. And that's not the point.
Right.
Because some people are that and they flame out in 5 minutes. And some people have very long sustained career where they build a body of work, even if though they might have been the it guy at various points or not in their career. the point is to build a foundation and something that you just can constantly build on, so that, you know, I'd like to die on my feet, you know, doing what I like to do.
Well, it looks like you're totally on track to do that now. I mean, it's been years. You've done a million things now. Good, solid things in all different areas. Well, of course,
some
it
I'm
has to be.
super proud of, some not. Some I'm like,
right,
you saw that? How did you find that? Someone came up to me about a movie that I made. Oh my God, the worst. So I've made some real pieces of crap because I had to make a living, you know, and or I thought something might be good and it turned to be a disaster, you know, and those are the things that do not go away, and you're like, oh my God. And other things that
somebody's gonna want to look something up now.
I don't want them to. They can go through my IMDb and go, what is that?
Right.
But
that may be it.
But other things that I'm super proud of that I thought were brilliant and didn't get a shot, like a film I did that I thought was such a beautiful movie called The Substance of Fire. That was based on a wonderful John Robin Bates play. That, you know, was did fine, but I feel like should have gotten more exposure than it did. I've, you know, many of those.
Okay.
A beautiful film called An American Rhapsody that I did with Scarlett Johansson and Nastasia Kinski 20 years ago. Not quite 20 years ago, but that was beautiful. Lots of small films that I've done that just haven't, you know.
Yeah, it's almost like the Bryan Cranston thing, like you were saying before.
Yeah.
Like they're great and they're amazing, but they don't necessarily get pulled into the stratosphere.
Yeah, or they don't find an audience, or it's not their moment, or whatever.
But it doesn't mean that they're not good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have limited time, and I have a million other things to talk to you about. So I have to kind of pick and choose right now what some of my things are. But I want to know about your wife Jane. You've been married a long time.
Yep.
You wrote, one of the things that you wrote, we started talking about you being a writer, was for More magazine, which I think is now defunct.
Right.
Sorry to say, but I can't find the full article anyway. I only got the first page.
Yeah, what was that about?
You were writing about three
that was a while
generations
ago. Oh yeah,
of
that was
women.
an interesting article. I've written a bunch of stuff about women, and about certainly I wrote something recently for In Style about
I read that
Me
one.
Too movement,
which was good. Everyone should read that too. It was interesting about when.
It's about the the Me Too men's movement that's come up. But the thing in More magazine a few years ago, I wrote about feminism, sort of, about my perspective on three generations of women, and my mother, who was a very gifted woman, but who really didn't achieve her potential professionally, I felt, because she was part of a generation where she felt the need to sublimate her professional identity to that of her husbands, plural, my dad and then my stepfather. You know, and yet my wife Jane, who came of age in the 70s, really, and was really part of the first broad generation of women who really, achieved their potential, but still very much in a man's world, and it was a fight. And now I have two daughters who are in their 20s who view it as their birthright. Like, they don't even question that they should be successful, and yet they still now, since that article, because at that age I think Tess was probably still in college, and
I think
Anna was just out of college, or maybe I can't remember when I wrote that, but they were just kind of,
I think you said college age kids.
I think they were both college age kids, and maybe Anna was in grad school or something, but they hadn't yet faced the world. And now that they both are, you know, and particularly with the events of the last year in the Me Too movement, you know, coming up against still the intransigence of the challenges of a male-dominated society. And obviously in the last year, it's all blown wide open. But that was a piece where I just kind of looked at those three generations and how I saw that.
Yep. Reflective, analytical, in your head.
Am I right? Yeah.
I suppose. And that's what helps you do what you do so well, I think.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's
but sometimes
a necessary
it's
thing.
But it's probably there's probably a downside of it.
No.
No?
Well, the downside of it, I don't find it a downside now. As a younger man, being introspective can become navel-gazing in a way that's not terribly productive.
Okay.
And actors tend to be quite narcissistic anyway. So frankly, until I had children, it was not a great thing, because I'd spent a lot of my time thinking about myself and my place in the world, and that was not helpful. Once you have kids, they're kind of like, get over yourself. It's all about me.
Yes.
And that was very good for me.
Yes.
And I do have a wife who reinforced that
As all
the
good
view
wives
of the
do.
world. So I'm very appreciative to Jane, who was kind of like, get over yourself. When I'd be like, acting so hard, blah, blah, whatever.
Right. But you need that, right? Exactly. You need that to kind of offset it.
Very, very lucky for the women in my life.
One of my last questions I always like to finish with is a two-parter. Number one is, who do people assume you are? Like, what's the image they have of Tony Goldwyn?
I don't know 100%. I'm always surprised by the comment I get very often when I work with people is, you're such a nice guy. Like, you're so normal. You're so down to earth. I'm so surprised by that. And I think, or you're so humble. And I'm like, what did you expect? I don't know what people expect. I don't know if because I am from a Hollywood family that people think I'll be an arrogant prick, or just because I've had some success that I will be that.
Right.
I don't know. But
Who knows?
So I don't know. But people seem to have this like reaction to me of like surprise that I'm like a decent human being.
Right. Or maybe it could be because you've had success. But no, I don't think that would really.
I don't know. Maybe it's a combination of both.
Yeah. Or like maybe they see you from Ghost or something.
Famous or maybe that's it too. That I played villainous characters, so they expect me to be a scumbag. I don't know.
Which clearly you aren't.
Honestly, I'm not. I mean, not that I'm. We're none of us perfect, but yeah.
So who are you in reality?
I'm still figuring that out.
Good answer.
I'll get back to you on my deathbed.
You think you'll have it figured out by then?
Well, that's just all I got by that point. I'll have full information.
Hold on, don't press stop yet. Tony and I recorded a short video with quick answer questions. And even though we did it specifically for my YouTube channel, I'm going to play it for you here on the podcast too in just a minute. Of course, it is great fun to watch him respond to my questions. So if you want to see it, of course you can. Just click on the link in today's show notes or subscribe to my YouTube channel. One side note before Tony's extra bit, if you like the podcast, it would be amazing if you want to rate it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. Just tap on the number of stars you think it deserves. You don't even have to write a full-on review, but if you're a writer like Tony, go ahead and craft a few words if you'd like and add that review. And now, Tony's bonus questions. Here we go. What are you obsessed with right now?
Network. Honestly, I'm in a Broadway show and I got to do it 8 times a week. So I'm obsessed with it right now.
What's one of your pet peeves?
We talked about this. Lying is one of my pet peeves. I can't stand it when people are full of shit.
We talked about this in the full podcast, which you can listen to right now, and you should because
it's really cool. We had a great conversation. You should go listen to the podcast.
On any podcast app.
Any podcast app. Okay.
What cracks?
Listen to Kara. You can't see her, but listen to her. What she says is very true.
That's right. What cracks you up? That was my next question. Perfect.
So many things crack me up. What cracks me up? My wife cracks me up. Yeah. My own fallibility cracks me up. I do laugh at myself a lot. I don't know. My wife just makes me laugh. She's not even being funny. I think just the way she is makes me laugh.
If you could choose 2 celebrities to be your parents, who would you choose?
Barack and Michelle Obama.
Are you a good driver or a bad driver?
I think I'm a good driver, but I'm probably not as good as I think I am.
Fast or slow?
Fast-ish.
Fast showers or long showers?
Long showers.
If you invited me over for dinner, what would you prepare?
I'd probably grill you some fish and fish and maybe some grilled salmon with rosemary on it, and we'll have some roasted potatoes and then I'll make some maybe some sautéed spinach with garlic. Would that be good?
Oh, healthy and delicious.
Yeah, healthy
I like
and
it.
delicious.
What's your guilty pleasure?
Binge watching television.
Which shows?
Right now I'm into Narcos Mexico.
One gig that got away.
Oh, golly. Oh, yeah. Years and years ago when I was first starting out, I was offered a wonderful play by the great playwright Rupert Holmes, who created The Mystery of Edwin Drood. And I got offered the lead in this play, and I had not done anything really professional. I'd done a couple things professionally, but I was just getting started. And it was in Los Angeles at the Pasadena place. My agents talked me out of doing it because they said, you really should hold out for a big television job. And I was like, really? And it was a great part. And so I turned it down. It ended up being this big hit, and it went to Broadway. And there was no television job. I was unemployed for the entire time.
But you did eventually get a television job.
Eventually I
and
did.
And a few Broadway
and then
plays.
Things ended up okay. Yeah.
What, if you weren't an actor, what would you be?
Unemployed.
President Fitzgerald Grant. React.
Misunderstood leader of our country, but had his fun too on this, anyway. Fitz, I know I'm very lucky to have played. Fitz was a great character.
All right, give me your first thought. I'm going to say one television show or movie that you've been in. Just first thing that comes to mind.
Of a television show or movie I've been in?
Yeah, I'm going to give you the name. So you're just going to have to respond.
Oh, I don't have to tell you.
Or been in or directed. No.
Okay.
You don't have to,
Go ahead,
I
yeah.
already have those names. Dexter.
Blood.
Justified.
Tim Oliphant.
Ghost.
Oh my God, Fantasy Come True.
Divergent.
Shailene.
Without a Trace.
Oh God, that one didn't work out so well.
Why?
It was just maybe because I don't like my performance in it. The movie didn't turn out so well, but it was one of those ones where I was still learning how to act in front of the camera. I don't know what it was. Anyway,
Wait
we're
a
gonna
minute.
get into. You're not my. I feel like I should be with my shrink now. What? 25 years ago, I still haven't gotten over this film I did. Okay. Anyway,
I'm glad
keep going.
I found
Can we move on
I
from
touched a
Without
nerve.
Trace?
He's moving right
Yes.
on. The Pelican Brief.
Oh, Alan Pakula. I feel so lucky to have worked with him.
Frasier.
Frasier was so fun. That was the first Frasier after 9/11, and I remember it was the first one because one of the great executive producers of that show died in United 91, and they were grieving, and I showed up for the first episode they shot after that. That's what I will remember. Not exactly a sitcom.
No.
But it was very intense.
Private Practice.
Private Practice, well, my second experience with Shonda. I mean, I started directing Grey's Anatomy, and then I directed one of the first Private Practices too. Shonda, my love.
Grey's Anatomy.
Well, kind of the same. Grey's was one of the first television shows I'd done, and it's where I met Shonda and was like, whoa, this lady knows what she's doing. So I'm very, and you just knew it was a great show. Well before it aired, I just was like, this works.
Dirty Sexy Money.
Donald Sutherland. I got to work with Donald Sutherland. That was another great show. And also, I should add, Bellamy Young was where I met Bellamy, who played Billy Baldwin's wife on that. If you haven't seen Dirty Sexy Money, check it out. It was such a good show.
It was
And
a fun
didn't get
show. It was kind of like a guilty pleasure show.
Incredible cast.
Right?
Oh my God. Yeah, the cast on that was fantastic.
Okay, let's come over here quick. I'm going to get in.
All right.
Hi, it's Kara and
Tony,
we have a nice long podcast for you to listen to.
check it out.
Tune in to any podcast app, including Apple Podcasts,
You'll hear
Spotify.
all about my middle school years.
It's very good.
You can't wait. It's
You
so
gotta
good.
tune in. It's
That was
good.
that was one of my best moments. Okay. It's all been downhill from there.